The grand chamber of Zelver Prime was a monolith of opulence and arrogance, its towering obsidian pillars carved with the victories of 1,000 wars. The air was thick with the scent of exotic incense, a subtle but deliberate reminder that those who entered stood before the most powerful rulers in the galaxy. At the center of the chamber, beneath a dome of shifting constellations, Ambassador Marcus Raines stood alone. He had known this moment would come, had prepared for it, but as the eyes of the Galactic Senate fell upon him with barely concealed disdain, he felt the weight of futility pressing against his ribs. They had already made up their minds. Chancellor Velos IX, draped in his traditional black and gold regalia, regarded Raines with a look of polite condescension. His violet-hued skin shimmered under the artificial starlight, and when he finally spoke, his voice carried the slow, deliberate cadence of one unaccustomed to being contradicted. "You have traveled far to address this council, human. I trust what you bring us is worth our time." Raines inhaled slowly, steadying himself. "I believe it is, Chancellor. It concerns the survival of this empire." A ripple of amusement passed through the assembly. The Zelverians, ancient and assured in their dominance, rarely considered survival a matter of concern. To them, war was a game of strategy, played against lesser species who lacked the wisdom to accept subjugation. They had never encountered an enemy they could not break. With a wave of his hand, Raines activated the holographic display. The lights dimmed, and above the central podium, the projection flickered into existence, a swirling mass of black and crimson, a monstrous tide creeping through the void. Its edges pulsed like a living thing, but there was no biology to it, only a mindless hunger, a cold inevitability. "We call them the Devourers," Raines said, his voice firm despite the murmurs that rose around him. "Our long-range probes detected them moving beyond the galactic perimeter. We first believed it to be a rogue stellar phenomenon, but further analysis confirmed the truth. This is not a natural force. It is an intelligence. A construct." The murmurs turned to scoffs. A Zelverian senator, his silver robes trailing like liquid metal, leaned forward. "A construct? You expect us to believe that an artificial threat of this scale exists beyond our borders, and yet we, who have mapped the galaxy for millennia, have seen no sign of it." "It is not from this galaxy," Raines pressed. "It comes from beyond. And it does not wage war as you understand it. It does not negotiate. It does not conquer. It consumes. Every system it reaches is reduced to lifeless rock. Every fleet that opposes it vanishes. We have traced the remnants of civilizations that encountered it before us. None survived." Chancellor Velos exhaled slowly, a measured display of patience. "Tell me, Ambassador Raines, why should we believe that your fledgling species has uncovered something that our own intelligence networks have not? Either you possess knowledge beyond your means, which would be troubling, or you are mistaken. Which is it?" Raines felt the familiar burn of frustration, but he refused to let it surface. The Dominion has always viewed humanity as insignificant, but that insignificance has given us an advantage. We have had to look where you would not. We have had to listen where you assumed silence. That is why we detected them first. Another senator, a woman with gilded facial markings, sighed. "Enough of this. The human speaks as if they hold wisdom beyond the High Council. This is nothing more than an attempt to provoke fear and elevate their standing in the Senate." Raines tightened his jaw. "You think this is political maneuvering? Then disregard my words. Look at the data." He expanded the projection, revealing planetary scans, intercepted transmissions, the last desperate signals from doomed civilizations now erased from history. "We have evidence. You need only open your eyes." Velos studied the images, his expression unreadable. For a fleeting moment, Raines thought he saw something flicker in the Chancellor's golden eyes. Doubt, curiosity. But then it was gone, replaced by the same detached arrogance that had ruled this empire for eons. "The Dominion has stood for 100,000 years," Velos said at last. "We have defeated threats beyond counting. If these Devourers exist, then they will meet the same fate as all who came before them. The Grand Fleet is unmatched in strength. The High Command will address any disturbances that arise. There is no cause for alarm." Raines shook his head. You don't understand. Your fleets are useless against them. Energy weapons are absorbed. Conventional tactics will fail. You cannot simply outgun them. The only way to win is to prepare now, while we still have time. The Chancellor smiled, a slow, indulgent thing. And what would you have us do, Ambassador? Mobilize our forces based on the words of a single species that has barely ventured beyond its own system? Declare war on the void itself. I would have you listen, Rains said, the plea heavy in his voice. Because if you do not, then the Dominion will fall. And not even your arrogance will survive what comes next. A long silence followed. Then the Chancellor lifted his hand, and in a synchronized motion, the senators activated their voting sigils. The result appeared in golden light above the chamber. Unanimous rejection. The decision was final. The warning was ignored. Rains exhaled, not in shock but in grim resignation. He had known this would happen. He had seen it in their eyes before he had even spoken. The Zelvarians did not fear extinction. They did not believe in it. The session was adjourned. The holograms faded, and the senators rose from their seats, already discussing matters they deemed more pressing: trade disputes, territorial skirmishes, the delicate balance of their self-proclaimed empire. No one spared Rains a second glance. As he turned to leave, his mind was already working through contingencies. The Dominion would not act, but humanity had learned long ago that waiting for permission was a fool's game. If the Empire would not defend itself, then Earth would prepare alone. Because the Devourers were coming. And soon, the arrogance of the Zelvarians would burn away in the cold, merciless dark. The first colony to fall was Varos III, a Zelvarian mining outpost on the Empire's farthest rim. It was not a world of strategic importance, nor was it heavily defended. When its distress signal flickered across subspace, it was dismissed as a minor malfunction. Entire sectors suffered from communication failures on occasion. Ion storms, pirate raids, or internal rebellions had been known to disrupt signals for hours, sometimes even days. No one gave it a second thought. Then the second colony went dark. And the third. Within a single cycle, entire star systems vanished from the Dominion's outermost borders, their final transmissions distorted into garbled screams before being swallowed by silence. Scouts sent to investigate never returned. By the time the Empire acknowledged the growing pattern, it was already too late for a measured response. Admiral Cale Vorton stood aboard the bridge of the Imperius Rex, the flagship of the Zelvarian Grand Fleet. The warship was a fortress of golden alloy and gravimetric shielding, bristling with weaponry that had broken empires and reduced armadas to cosmic debris. No power in the known galaxy could stand against it. Yet, as Vorton watched the latest intelligence report stream across the holotable before him, a rare unease settled in his chest. "How many systems lost?" he asked, his voice cold and even. The officer before him, a younger Zelvarian named Tereth, hesitated, eyes flicking between the data and his superior. 32, Admiral. Vorton turned sharply. 32. The number was staggering. No conflict in the past 10 millennia had seen such catastrophic losses in so short a time. Even the Vorkesh War, the bloodiest in the Dominion's history, had not claimed worlds with such ruthless efficiency. "We've received fragmented sensor data from our last scout vessel," Tereth continued, his tone brittle with uncertainty. "They managed to transmit visuals before their destruction. I believe you should see it for yourself." A command was given, and the central display shifted. The footage was raw, the transmission corrupted by interference, but the image remained clear enough. At first, there was nothing, only the cold, empty black of space. Then something moved. The darkness itself seemed to shift, a tide of mechanical bodies slithering through the void. Ships, if they could be called that, twisted and folded in ways that defied logic, their surfaces writhing with self-replicating constructs. There was no cohesion, no formation, only endless, mindless consumption. A Zelvarian cruiser fired upon them, its golden beams of energy lashing out with devastating force. For a moment, the footage brightened in a blaze of destruction. Then, impossibly, the swarm absorbed the impact, the energy dispersing harmlessly across its shifting mass. The constructs surged forward, enveloping the cruiser like a nest of starving insects. The final image was a flicker of interior footage, Zelvarian officers screaming as their ship was devoured from within, before the signal cut to black. Silence swallowed the command deck. Vorton exhaled slowly. He had commanded fleets for centuries. He had seen every manner of enemy, from the precision-driven warforms of the Ciliac to the berserker hordes of the Tarvash. There had always been logic to war, even at its most brutal. But this was not war. This was extinction. The doors to the bridge hissed open, and a new figure entered. Marcus Rains. The human ambassador had arrived uninvited, escorted by 2 Zelvarian guards who seemed more irritated than concerned. His presence aboard the flagship had already been a point of contention, a diplomatic relic from the failed Senate negotiations. He should have been ignored, dismissed like all the other nameless officials trapped within the Empire's bureaucracy. And yet, in this moment, Vorton found himself staring at the one man who had tried to warn them. Rains wasted no time. "You've seen it, haven't you?" Vorton's expression darkened. "You knew this was coming." "I told you it was coming," Rains said. "You refused to listen." A muscle twitched in the Admiral's jaw. He had no patience for gloating, not now. "Tell me what we're dealing with, human." Rains stepped forward, activating a separate projection of his own. Unlike the Empire sensor feeds, this one was human in origin. Compiled data, predictive models, detailed analysis. It was clear they had been preparing for this far longer than the Dominion had even acknowledged the threat. "They don't function like any military force you've ever encountered," Rains said. "They don't have command structures, fleet formations, or supply lines. They don't need them. They're self-replicating, adaptive, and constantly evolving. Every failed attack makes them stronger. They study their opponents, absorb their technology, and improve themselves in real time." Vorton narrowed his gaze. "Then how do we kill them?" "You don't," Rains answered. "Not with your current strategy. Your fleets are useless. Energy-based weaponry is worse than ineffective. It feeds them. Every shot you fire will only accelerate their growth. If you throw your forces at them now, you'll be handing them the entirety of the Dominion." The tension in the room sharpened. Tereth, still struggling to maintain the facade of Zelvarian confidence, scoffed. "You speak as if you have the solution, human. If you do, I suggest you share it before your own worlds are reduced to dust." Rains ignored the jab. "We do have a solution. But you won't like it." Vorton folded his arms. "Try me." Rains hesitated for the briefest of moments, then made his choice. He deactivated the hologram and met the Admiral's gaze with an expression devoid of mockery or satisfaction. There was only grim reality. "Humanity saw this coming long before you did. We knew you wouldn't listen, so we started preparing alone. We've developed countermeasures, kinetic weaponry, electromagnetic disruptors, things that might give us a fighting chance. But even those won't be enough on their own." He paused, his voice turning cold. "There's only one way to stop them. We have to go on the offensive. And we have to do it now." Vorton regarded him for a long moment. The weight of centuries pressed against him, the knowledge that the decisions he made in the next few hours would determine whether the Dominion stood or fell. Every instinct told him to dismiss the human, to assert Zelvarian dominance, to trust in the strength of the Grand Fleet. But instinct had failed them already. The Devourers were coming. And this time, the Empire was the prey. The first engagement was a massacre. Admiral Cale Vorton stood on the bridge of the Imperius Rex, watching in silence as the Dominion's fleets burned. The Grand Armada, once the mightiest force in the known galaxy, had deployed over 100 warships to the contested sector, each a monument to Zelvarian engineering. They had positioned themselves in an unbreakable wall of destruction, a barrier of golden hulls and gravimetric shields. Their weapons, powerful enough to shatter moons, had primed for the oncoming storm. None of it mattered. The Devourers descended like a cosmic plague, their movements more akin to a tidal wave than a fleet. The first Zelvarian cruisers fired beams of searing energy, weapons that had broken civilizations and humbled rebellions. The result was catastrophic, not for the enemy, but for the Empire. The moment the energy struck the shifting mass of constructs, It was absorbed, converted, redirected. The attacking ships flared like dying stars as their own firepower was turned against them. The battle, if it could even be called that, lasted 13 minutes. When it was over, nothing remained of the fleet but drifting wreckage and silent echoes of distress calls that would never be answered. Vorton's fingers curled into a fist. He had seen defeat before, but never like this. This was not war. This was slaughter. The Zelvarians had spent millennia believing themselves invincible, and now they were learning the truth in the worst way possible. Behind him, Marcus Raines exhaled through clenched teeth. "I warned you." Vorton did not turn. "I do not need reminders, human." Raines stepped forward, his expression grim but determined. "Then you understand now. Everything you know about warfare is useless. The longer you keep throwing fleets at them, the more powerful they'll become." Vorton exhaled slowly. The Empire had never known true fear. It had never needed to. Fear was for lesser beings, for conquered species who bowed before the Dominion's might. But standing here, watching the wreckage of his people drift into the void, he felt it creeping in. For the first time in his centuries of command, he did not know what to do. Raines, however, did. "There's a way to fight them," the human continued. "Kinetic weapons. Electromagnetic disruptors. Crude by Zelvarian standards, but effective. My people have been developing them in secret, preparing for this moment. We need to move now." Vorton turned at last, his golden eyes burning with restrained fury. "You expect me to trust you? After all that has happened?" Raines met his gaze without flinching. "I expect you to survive." A tense silence passed between them. Then, finally, the Admiral straightened. His decision had been made. "Prepare the fleet," Vorton commanded. "Summon every remaining warship. We make our stand at Zelver Prime." Raines shook his head. "No. You don't get it. If you wait for them to come to you, you're already dead. We have to strike first. We have to take the fight to them." Vorton hesitated, every fiber of his being rejecting the idea of abandoning his homeworld's defense. The thought of Zelver Prime, his people's greatest city, the heart of the Empire, left vulnerable was unthinkable. And yet, as he looked back at the destruction before him, he realized the truth. There would be no defense. There would be no retreat. There was only victory, or extinction. "Where?" he asked. Raines turned to the holomap, highlighting a system on the outer edge of the war zone. "Here. We've detected their origin point. If we hit them hard enough, disrupt their replication process, we might be able to cripple their advance." Vorton studied the map, then gave a slow nod. It was a desperate gamble. But desperation was all they had left. "Then we strike," he said. The battle for survival had begun. The fleet moved like a spear through the void, a convergence of human and Zelvarian warships that should never have fought side by side. What had once been enemies now stood as the last hope of the galaxy. The vastness of space offered no comfort, no shelter, only the inevitable clash that awaited them at the heart of the approaching storm. Admiral Cale Vorton stood at the command dais of the Imperius Rex, his golden eyes locked onto the swirling mass in the distance. The Devourers had nested here, coiled around the shattered remains of an obliterated world. They pulsed and twisted, growing, changing, feeding. There was no strategy to their movements, no logic that organic minds could decipher. They simply existed to consume. "Fleet is in position," Commander Tereth reported, his voice taut with restrained dread. Vorton nodded. "Weapons ready? All kinetic batteries primed. Magnetic warheads are loaded. Human forces report full combat readiness." It still felt unnatural to rely on human weaponry, primitive and inelegant by Zelvarian standards. Their railguns, their explosive projectiles, so crude, so inefficient. And yet, they had proven effective where the Empire's brilliance had failed. For once, refinement had been a weakness. Marcus Raines stood beside him, arms crossed, his face lined with the exhaustion of a man who had fought this battle long before anyone else understood its importance. "We only get one shot at this, Admiral. If we don't take out their core, they'll adapt, and this strategy won't work again. Vorton did not look at him. Then we do not fail. The order was given. The first barrage erupted from the fleet, a rain of solid tungsten slugs and electromagnetic pulses. Unlike energy weapons, these projectiles could not be absorbed, could not be turned back upon their senders. They ripped through the devourers like meteor storms, shattering their writhing forms into fragments that did not regenerate. The swarm reacted instantly. The darkness surged, shifting in ways that defied physics. Entire portions of the devourer's mass split apart, forming grotesque shapes, living tendrils of metal and nanite-infested wreckage. They hurled themselves toward the fleet, an unrelenting tide that sought to consume everything in its path. Zelvarian warships, designed for elegance and precision, adapted with ruthless efficiency. Their shielding had been stripped down, their systems reconfigured to allow for brute-force kinetic strikes. They fired in relentless unison alongside human dreadnoughts, sending wave after wave of solid ammunition into the enemy. But the devourers learned. For every fragment destroyed, another twisted itself into something new. They absorbed the remains of their fallen, reshaping into denser, faster horrors. They began to maneuver around the bombardment, shifting their attacks to exploit gaps in the fleet's formation. Vorton gritted his teeth. Increase fire rate. No breathing room. Explosions rippled through the darkness as the swarm crashed into the forward battle line. Ships vanished in an instant, torn apart from within as devourer fragments latched onto hulls, burrowing deep before detonating. Zelvarian cruisers were swallowed whole, human battleships ripped open like paper. The screams over the comms came quickly. "We're losing ships," Tereth shouted. "They're breaking through." Vorton turned sharply to Rains. "Tell me you have a contingency." Rains didn't hesitate. "We hit the core. Now." At the heart of the devourer's nest, buried beneath layers of writhing mass, pulsed a singularity of seething darkness. Their origin, their intelligence, the one thing that had remained unchanged through every battle. Humanity's research had identified it as the control hub, the one vulnerability in an otherwise indestructible foe. "All forces," Vorton ordered, "concentrate fire on the core." The fleet shifted. Whatever formations had been maintained collapsed into raw, desperate aggression. The surviving ships charged toward the heart of the devourers, weaving through collapsing debris and explosions. Railgun slugs and warheads tore open the void, forcing a path toward the core. The devourers resisted, coiling inwards, protecting their heart. They knew. A Zelvarian cruiser detonated on impact, sacrificing itself to breach the final defensive layer. The core was exposed. "This is it," Rains barked. "Everything we've got." Vorton gave the order. Every remaining warship fired. A wall of kinetic force slammed into the core, warheads detonating in synchronized precision. The singularity shuddered, pulsed, then collapsed. For a moment, nothing. Then the swarm convulsed. The entire mass of the devourers twisted in on itself, limbs flailing, constructs shattering as if their cohesion had been severed. The tide of destruction faltered. The consuming force that had devoured empires began to collapse upon itself. And then, at last, silence. The fleet hung in the void, surrounded by wreckage, by the remnants of a battle that had almost doomed them all. The devourers were gone. The war was over. Vorton exhaled, turning to Rains. For the first time, there was no bitterness in his gaze. Only understanding. "You were right." Rains gave a tired, hollow smile. "I wish I hadn't been." The galaxy would remember this day, not as a victory, not as a triumph, but as the moment they had stood at the brink of extinction and survived.